The Chicago Bears used their bye week to fix their rushing offense and run defense against the Washington Commanders with some key changes that made all the difference.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lauren Cox. I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. You can follow me on Twitter at CoxSports1, and you can follow the podcast at Locked On Bears on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and the Locked On Bears YouTube channel, where you can keep up with all of our video podcasts as well. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use our promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. On the show today, I want to look back over the Bears' win over the Commanders, specifically looking at what worked so well for DeAndre Swift in the ground game and how that seemed to come together with some changes during the bye week. And same thing on the other side of the ball, where the Bears' 32nd ranked run defense found a way to slow down the number one ranked rush offense with a few changes on that side that also, I think, made a big difference there. And then we'll wrap up taking a closer look at what Caleb Williams did there, as well as his receivers in this game. And a lot of people calling for Luther Burden to overtake Olamide Zaccheaus after this game, and I think there's some merit to that, but also it might not be quite so simple. But I want to start with the running game, because that was such a revelation coming into this one, that all season it had been such a struggle to get the ground game going, and all of a sudden DeAndre Swift looks like a Pro Bowl running back in over 100 yards and has a big play in the passing game as well. And I do think there's something to be said about, that momentum building on itself, that once you start getting him going in one area, it starts to make everyone a little bit more confident, and the explosive plays start to build off of each other, right? There's a cumulative effect of that. But more than anything, it felt like with DeAndre Swift, the Bears found a rushing identity and stuck to it, and got a little bit back more towards what we had seen Ben Johnson have success with the Detroit Lions. Like, yes, they were trying to sort of find their own Bears offensive identity, but it felt like they got back to a little bit more like the bread and butter, the basics of, hey, this is what we know has worked in the past with this system, with this running back in this system, with this right guard in this system as well. And so against Washington, they really went back into more of a stretch zone, get to the sidelines, get to the space on the field type of running game, when through the first handful of weeks, it felt like they were trying to be a little bit more downhill and north-south and trying to find any lane for DeAndre Swift in that area. And I think it's worth noting, like, when they tried to get to the edges and the sidelines in the first few weeks of the season, they weren't having as much success either, but they really stuck with it against the Commanders, and it worked through and through. If you look at how the Bears split up the run plays in terms of like the run concepts, the play calls they had for DeAndre Swift, most of his runs came on those outside zone handoffs, like where everyone on the offensive line is stepping horizontally at the same direction to the same place, and they're kind of just stretching it towards the sideline. He works horizontally and then makes one cut and goes upfield. And I think better blocking from the offensive tackles made a big difference there in the running game, with Darnell Wright back and blocking very well. Theo Benedict having a good game in the ground game, at least setting that edge or sort of holding that edge to create more space for DeAndre Swift to break free. And that's where you get these like consistent chunk gains, 6, 7, 8, 9 yards over there. He averaged 6.6 yards per carry on those outside zone runs, as opposed to 4 yards per carry on the more downhill runs, the inside zone and the man blocking, the duo blocking, where they're going a little bit more north-south. 4 yards still isn't bad on those plays either, but they were clearly finding a lot more space on the edge, especially when you add in, what they call like the pin and pull type of run, where it's a very similar feel, where you're handing it off to the running back and he's trying to get to the sideline, but you have usually a wide receiver or a tight end or both blocking down, like blocking, say the run is to the right, well, the receiver and tight end will block to the left, and then you'll pull the tackle or a guard out in front as a lead blocker. Sort of the pin is and pull is the concept there. And that was a big play for this Bears team, especially late in the game when Darnell Wright had that like 2-for-1 block where he blocked two different guys, took him out of the play, and Swift had that room to run. Like, it's two different running plays, but has a similar effect for the running back, but looks very different for the offense when guys are pulling versus flowing entirely as a line there. But like, that's where the bread and butter of this Bears running game was against the Commanders, and it absolutely worked, and it felt so much more like an identity and like it was putting DeAndre Swift in the best positions to be successful in this game. Because I think this running game with Swift like that, this is how it's supposed to look. And it's not always gonna look amazing in some of the more like advanced statistics, some of the PFF stats. Like DeAndre Swift had one missed tackle in this game on the, 14 carries he had, and his yards after contact numbers aren't great. And it's like, well, isn't that just all great run blocking then? The yards before contact that the Bears average in this game was super, super high. And I think sometimes we don't account for how much the running back also plays a factor in the yards before contact stat. They think, that's just all offensive line blocking. But no, like the running back's speed to get to the second level before contact is made by a defender also has a factor in yards before contact. Offensive line run blocking is certainly the bigger of the factors, but it's certainly the running back plays a role in that as well. So like you see DeAndre Swift in a game like this, he creates more quote unquote yards after contact on those inside runs, the inside zone and the man duo runs, where he has a higher yards after contact per carry on those because there's not as much room to run and he's in the middle. He's going to be contacted earlier and then be forced to create those yards after contact. Whereas when he's taking it to the edge and then cutting up field, he's not getting contacted until he's 4, 5, 6 yards downfield. Then maybe he only gets 1 or 2 extra yards after contact. And it's like, DeAndre Swift isn't quote unquote creating very many yards for himself. But in reality, like he created the yards by having the speed to get to the space and through the space before that hole fills up, right? The offensive line blocking, creates a hole for a limited amount of time. And if you're not a fast enough back or explosive enough to get through there in time, that hole can close before you get there. And then you have to make a different adjustment, a different cut from there. But Swift was able to get upfield, like when he made the cut, get upfield quickly with decisiveness, not sitting around back there waiting for the perfect hole to open up, just get it and go. And that felt like a much more cohesive, all-around offensive running game identity that went a long way towards this group getting going there. And then you can add in, they gave it to Monangai a handful of times there, he finished with 5 carries for 19 yards. And his 2 were still more of the zone style, but a little bit more downhill running and a little bit more, having to earn yards after contact, a little more up the middle inside zone. And I think that's kind of the balance the Bears are going to have to strike here, where it's like, Swift is going to have to be more of a get to the sidelines kind of guy. And that means there's going to be opportunities when you need somebody else to pound it between the tackles. And you can still occasionally pound it between the tackles with Swift, but like that sort of, thunder and lightning type of combo or whatever you want to call it, like that's going to be the best role for him. And I think it can be a really good role for Kyle Monangai. And if the offensive line can keep run blocking like this, you can have yourself a more than competent rushing offense. Now, I wouldn't expect 108 yards a game from DeAndre Swift from here on out. I wouldn't expect the offensive line will run block this well every single week. I mean, I think certainly they weren't perfect, but it was much improved. But there's going to be ups and downs with the back and with the blockers as well. But it's a really good sign of like, hey, they clearly figured some things out and then stuck to that, and it worked. The same thing is true on defense, where we were all worried about Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt becoming the NFL's number 1 rushing offense, I guess, as a whole, with Jaden Daniels rushing in there, but running all over this team and being a really effective ball carrier in the backfield. But the Bears found a way to hold him under 4 yards per carry, and some of it is individual players playing better, but I think there were also some specific things Dennis Allen did differently to slow down this Washington Commanders running game I want to dive into next on Locked On Bears.
I'm Cody Rourke from Locked On Broncos, and this episode is brought to you by Peloton. Peloton is shaping the future of fitness with the brand new Peloton Cross-Training Tread Plus, powered by Peloton IQ. This is Peloton's most advanced equipment yet, giving you real-time guidance and endless ways to move, whether you're running, lifting, or you're cross-training with your favorite instructors like Alex Toussaint. It's training reimagined to make your workout more personal. Peloton is built for breakthroughs. With features that help you plan, stay motivated, and hit peak performance, you can let yourself run, lift, flex, and go, while Peloton handles all the rest. Plus, Peloton IQ provides real-time strength coaching, tracking your progress and suggesting weights that challenge you so you can get stronger. Plus, the new movement tracking camera, it counts your reps and corrects your form in real time, making sure every rep is safer and smarter. So let yourself run, lift, flex, push, and go. Explore the new Peloton cross-training Tread Plus at onepeloton.com.
The Locked On Bears podcast is also brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. The NFL season is well underway, and FanDuel has an offer you don't want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if that bet wins, you will get $300 in bonus bets. That's right. Just pick a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, not only do you get the winnings from your $5 bet, but you're going to get an extra $300 in bonus bets on top of that $5 bet. So say you put $5 down on this Bears-Saints game coming up, where the line has moved. Bears are now 5.5-point favorites after beating the Commanders. The money line straight up is set at Bears minus 250 if you want to pick them to win. And the over-under is at 47.5 points for the point total there. So a $5 bet on that game, any other game, any prop bet, any other sport. And not only do you get the winnings from your $5 bet, but an extra $300 in bonus bets to play with all across the game, all across the FanDuel app. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com today to download the FanDuel app and get started. So just as the Bears made some really key changes on offense to get the run offense going, they also made some noticeable differences in the running defense to shut down's a strong word, but to really hold down the Washington Commanders rushing offense below anything that we expected coming into this game, where we kind of figured after Ashton Jeanty got rolling on this Bears run defense in the Raiders game before the bye week, when the Raiders hadn't been running the ball well. Now you go against the number one rushing offense on the other side, and it's like, well, you're not going to stop the running game, but maybe you hope you can still beat the Commanders in spite of it. But to be able to do so was really impressive. And I think there were some key differences in this game that were the biggest contributing factors towards this. Like the Swift thing, like sometimes it's just, hey, your players play better. Like individual players that weren't playing as well before played better in this game. I think Montez Sweat was really stellar on the edge. I think he's been pretty good against the run all season, but he had a really good game there. You know, TJ Edwards coming back from injury, really important there. And I think also Kyler Gordon in the slot, also a big factor in the running game, a massive upgrade there over Nick McLeod. Like those are kind of the things we might have expected coming into this game. But I think some ripple effects of that we might not have fully accounted for. I mean, first of all, TJ Edwards comes back, and he gets the green dot on the back of his helmet. Noah Sewell had been operating it as that linebacker that was kind of leading there, but like now it's back to Edwards, making sure that he's getting the play call in and getting everybody in place and making sure that they're filling the right run gaps. And as a result, you get Tremaine Edmonds playing more of that like weak side linebacker position and able to flow a little bit more sideline to sideline, whereas Edwards can be more of that front side of the play type of player to like, he can get there and not, like you could trust Edwards to make sure he's not overrunning his gap. And if he gets to where he needs to, then the running back can cut back into the arms of someone like Tremaine Edmonds. Like it's less critical for Edmonds to make the perfect run fit every time from more of the weak side linebacker position. I mean, it depends on the play and the situation and et cetera. But like, I think that is a real factor here. And another kind of hidden factor in there is that, I mean, Noah Sewell, and certainly the injury was scary, and we wish the best for him as he recovers from the concussion or whatever it ends up being. He led the NFL in missed tackles entering the bye week, and there's a benefit when a guy who's missing a lot of tackles is no longer out there missing tackles. Like, of course, he was good at making the right reads in the running game for sure, but just not being able to finish at the running back left extra yards on the field for opposing rushers. But TJ Edwards, I don't think he was credited with any missed tackles in this game, and that also can go a long way there. But like some of the more like simple big picture stuff here, Dennis Allen is not someone who goes to what they call base defense very often. Dennis Allen is usually in nickel defense, right? With Kyler Gordon as the third cornerback. But against the Commanders, they said, screw it. Let's put three linebackers in the field more. Kyler Gordon did not play as much. And Part of that is probably because it was Kyler Gordon's first game back. And I know at one point he kind of left the game and Nick McLeod came in for a couple of plays, but even a bigger picture over the course of this game, we saw more of the Bears' number 3 linebacker than we had seen in any game up to the point in this season. It also helps that because Edwards is back, then Noah Sewell becomes the number 3. It kind of moves him down the depth chart, and so it's easier to then trust him as your number 3 than trusting another backup as the number 3. I think it's absolutely worth noting that when Noah Sewell went out with the injury, they replaced him with DeMarco Jackson, who was, I think was he the guy they brought up from the practice squad or had been like an undrafted free agent on the practice squad, like wasn't really a big part of this team throughout much of the process, but he makes it onto the field instead of Ruben Hippolyte, your 4th-round pick. I think it's partially because this is more like a Sam strong side linebacker position, and it's not really Ruben Hippolyte's skill set, but I still think it says something when, that they opt for a guy who hasn't been here that long. Whether that's saying something negative about Hippolyte or saying something positive about DeMarco Jackson, the Bears claimed him on waivers from the Saints in August, and then I think he didn't make the initial 53 roster. Anyway, you get the point. Like, kind of a nobody comes in and gets playing time before Ruben Hippolyte, albeit in a maybe specific role that isn't as necessarily strong Hippolyte's strong point. But that point being, the Bears had extra bodies in the box, extra mass in the box. Like, not only did they were intentional about putting more guys in the box, but when they only had 7, sometimes it was 3 linebackers and 4 defensive linemen instead of 2 linebackers, a cornerback, and some defensive linemen, right? Like, just having a stronger, bigger, more physical position player in there does make a difference. And then Dennis Allen was very intentional about putting a lot of 8 and 9 man boxes in this game. If you look at it, Ja'Cory, I can never say his Bill Krosky Merritt for the Commanders. If you look at his run splits over the course of the game, like when the Bears had 7 guys in the box, he was still getting about 4 yards per carry. But when they went to 8 or 9, he was getting less than 2. Like, they loaded up the box on about half of his runs. I don't have the exact number left in front of me, and it absolutely worked. Now, that's not always going to be a super sustainable strategy against every opponent, because when you put 8 or 9 guys in the box, then you've got 1 or no safeties on the back end. When 9 guys in the box, then those cornerbacks are on islands. There's no safety help. When there's 8 guys in the box, you have a single deep safety, but there's still not much help on the outside. And I think this was a matchup where the Bears felt like, well, the Commanders don't have that deep threat outside receiver that really scares you. Like, Debo is a very talented receiver that scares you in other ways, working underneath, out of the slot, middle of the field, dynamic player, you can hand him the ball, but like not so much like sideline deep ball burner in some of the same ways. Like, I wonder if the strategy is different if Terry McLaurin is out there. And it's worth noting, like, the rookie Jalen Lane had a big deep touchdown. Luke McCaffrey had a big deep touchdown. Chris Moore had a touchdown catch. Like, these receivers don't scare you on paper by name necessarily, but they had big downfield touchdowns as a result of the Bears loading up the box and kind of leaving Stevenson and Wright on an island. And maybe they felt like they could get away with that against the Commanders in a way that you didn't feel like you could get away with it against Justin Jefferson of the Vikings, against Jamison Williams and Amon-Ra St. Brown of the Lions. I don't know that you're going to feel like you can get away with it against Jamar Chase of the Bengals coming up in a couple weeks, but against teams like the Commanders and the Raiders and maybe the Saints this coming week, I think you can go more single deep safety. The Bears were in cover 1 or cover 3 the majority of this game. There was not a lot of 2 deep safety coverages because I don't think they were as worried about the deep ball, even though they did get burned by it a couple of times. Like, that was kind of the trade-off and the risk that Dennis Allen had to take. It worked to stop the running game. I think they sacrificed some other things on the back end, but it absolutely got the job done. And one other note that I just want to throw in here to sort of pin for future reference, save it for a rainy day kind of thing. Rookie second-round pick Shamar Turner played the entire game at defensive end. Did not play defensive tackle for 1 snap. He was the backup defensive end opposite Dominique Robinson. So, Sweat and Passanio were your starters. Your backups were Shamar Turner and Dominique Robinson. Full-time defensive end in this game. So much for him playing defensive tackle throughout all of OTAs. I guess he missed all of training camp in the preseason, but nonetheless, like, they insisted from the beginning, we're going to make him a defensive tackle. And now 4 weeks into the regular season, they switch him to defensive end. It just feels like, why didn't they just make him a defensive end from the beginning? Like, they get paid more than I do. They know more than I do. Dennis Allen knows more about football than I'll ever know. But like, that's just one of those things. Like, how did you not? It reflects negatively on the coaching staff when you get to a certain point and you make a change that people were kind of wondering about at the very beginning, and it's not a hindsight thing of, well, why didn't he do it earlier when we kind of been talking about it as a possibility. When he got drafted, he played both edge and tackle in college. And we said, well, the Bears have a bigger needed edge rusher, so why don't they play him at edge or they put him at tackle? And now, lo and behold, he's back at edge. So I want to watch how he does in the coming games here, if they continue to leave him out at edge or if this was like a temporary one-game thing. But I think he's a bigger body edge rusher that certainly can help in the running game there, even if maybe the pass rush isn't quite where you want it to be yet. But I think all of those things contributed to the Bears stopping the run really well, just like we talked about all the different factors that got the offensive running game going pretty well. Those are all great things. I do want to talk about some of the things that went wrong in the Bears passing game. I want to dive a little bit closer into Caleb Williams' performance that I just think was not very sharp. I don't think it was a bad game because, heck, he got them to the win and especially drove down at the end, but like not a very good game from DeAndre Swift. And some questions from Caleb Williams. I keep defaulting to Swift. I don't know why. Not a very good game from Caleb Williams, but some issues with the receivers in there as well. And a lot of people calling for Luther Burden to take all of Olamide Zaccheaus' snaps, the more we've seen Zaccheaus struggle in a game like this. I'm not sure it's quite so simple, but I think there is some room to wiggle there. So we'll talk about Caleb and his receivers and what we saw against the Commanders next on Locked On Bears. The Locked On Bears podcast is brought to you by Gametime. The NFL season is back, and there's nothing better than being in the stadium surrounded by fans cheering on your team. But let's be honest, getting tickets can be a hassle. Between queues and login screens and prices jumping up at checkout, it's really frustrating. But that's why I use Gametime. I got the app on my phone because it gives the advantage back to the fans. Gametime is fast, easy, and backed by the Gametime guarantee, where you'll always get 100% authentic tickets delivered on time and at the best price. My favorite part is that they have all the fees included, so the price you see is the price you end up paying at checkout. I've used Gametime to go to Bears games. I go to concerts with Gametime, comedy shows, theater events, any kind of local secondary market tickets in your community. They'll have it for you on the Gametime app. So download Gametime, create an account, and use our promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Gametime today. The running game and run defense had a lot of improvement, and partially why I wanted to start there with the good. And I want to circle back to where I think they struggled a little bit in the passing game. And again, like Caleb Williams drove them down at the end of the fourth quarter, put them in field goal range, and won the game. Like you can't categorize it as a bad game from Caleb Williams when he does what the team needs the most when they need the most. But compared to how he had played against the Raiders and certainly against the Cowboys before that, it was a step back for sure. Too many passes that were not where the ball needed to be, and some put in harm's way a little bit more, and more inaccuracies than we had seen. And certainly the receivers had some influence on that as well. And also he was under pressure quite a bit in this game. But I think that's kind of my point, is I want to paint this as not just like Caleb individually had some bad game, but like, no, passing game as a whole was a little bit disjointed. And some of that was Caleb's fault. Some of that was receivers' fault. Some of that was pass protection. And I think the defense got after him a little bit more. They blitzed a decent amount in this game, almost a little over 40% of his snaps. And they were effective getting home on a lot of those blitzes. I think they got him under pressure on 9 of the 14 blitzes they sent at him. Sacked him 3 times in the game. 2 of those were on blitzes as well. So like these things are all factors in there. But I look at like Caleb Williams' throws in this game, and it's nice that True Media and PFF like charts incompletion types, and you can actually like assign it. You can actually look at the plays that each incompletion and what the reason was for each incompletion. I think it's worth noting kind of the variety for Caleb Williams. Like 4 of his incompletions were plays that went down as like pass breakups by defensive backs. 2 of those were plays that should have been intercepted, like hit the cornerback or the DB, whoever it was, in the hands. Should have been picked off. He had 2 should have been picked off plays. And if those are both interceptions, the way we talk about Caleb Williams' performance in this game, totally different, and probably is the difference between winning and losing in a game that they win by 1 point. But then he had 2 incompletions that were thrown too far in front of a receiver horizontally. He had 1 incompletion that was overthrowing a receiver vertically, 1 incompletion that was underthrowing a receiver vertically. He had 1 dropped pass, one miscommunication, one where the defender just hit the receiver so hard he couldn't hold on to the ball. Like, it does spread around in a bunch of different categories. But it felt like to me that some of it was Caleb trying to just rush it a little bit still. Sometimes he's not setting his feet properly, and that's when the accuracy is just off just a little bit, and that's enough to be the difference between a completion and an incompletion in the NFL. I think some of it was like trying to force a couple of things. The deep bomb into double coverage by Roma Dunze that just, I don't know, like he kind of rolled to his right and then loaded up and fired what felt like 70 yards downfield into double coverage. Like, that one's not a great decision. And I think one of those slants he tried to throw over the middle that should have been picked off also like didn't read the coverage right. Like, not a good decision there. He had a bad pass in there too, a throwaway in there, I think, as well. So like, it's a lot of like sprinklings of little things, right? It's not just like, oh, his accuracy is all over the place and that's the only problem. It's like, no, he had a few that were inaccurate. And it's not like, oh, he's making terrible decisions with the football and that's the problem. Like, no, he had a couple that I don't think were very good decisions. Or it's like, oh, receivers are dropping passes and they're not on the same page. It's like, yeah, that was a couple of plays in there, but like each one kind of added up to, whatever it was, the 11 incompletions he had, and you kind of split up that pie into 3 or 4 different categories. And the good news is it's not like he's got this one glaring weakness that he just can't figure out. And the bad news is it's a little bit of everything going wrong. So how do you fix it? Well, I think just like time on task and reps, right? Like working through those throws so you're not rushing it and trying to just force it in there or trying to make a big play happen when it's not there. Like, I think just over time, those little things can get better. Just like the miscommunications can get better, where it's just like, oh, he expects Zacchaeus to keep running on a slant, but Zacchaeus settles in between his zone and they just weren't on the same page about where they thought the ball was supposed to go. Like, those kind of things can come over time. And it's led to, I think, a broader social media discussion around the Bears of like, well, Luther Burden's doing all these great things every time he touches the ball, and Olamide Zacchaeus isn't. So they should just bench Zacchaeus and give Luther Burden all those snaps, and the offense is just going to take off from there. And I don't think it's quite that simple. I think they should play Luther Burden more and probably play Olamide Zacchaeus less. I mean, he had he was the leading receiver in terms of targets against the Commanders. 6 targets, but only 2 catches and 24 yards. Drop pass, and there would have been a lot more yards on that. But like, if you look at like how they use Olamide Zacchaeus, all of his routes, not all of them, but like most of his routes are like short, working over the middle of the field. And like Luther Burden can do that, but 2 things. One, I think there's a precision to what Olamide Zacchaeus does that I don't think Luther Burden is quite there yet. And obviously it's not producing a lot for the Bears, but more so just say like, if you put Burden in there, he won't be quite the security blanket that Zacchaeus has been for Caleb Williams. And yes, you would like to get more out of that security blanket, but I'm not sure Burden would be as reliable in that role. Like, once he makes the catches, I think he can do more with the ball in his hands, but he's not always going to be in the exact right place at the exact right time, running the crispest route in the world to create the separation for Williams to find him when needs him at that security blanket. So I think that is part of the process there. And then also, like, if you are running Luther Burden on all these kind of short over the middle routes, then you're missing out on some of his downfield playmaking ability and then the deeper stuff where you can use that speed to create separation instead of just short area quickness. So I think it's not as easy to just like plug and play Burden into Olamide Zacchaeus' role. Plus, I also think like Zacchaeus and Caleb Williams had a really strong connection throughout training camp and at the beginning of the season. So I'm not necessarily worried that all of a sudden they're just totally disconnected and are never going to get on the same page again. Like this game felt like a little bit more of an anomaly in that specific regard. Maybe not the lack of playmaking, but just the miscommunication drop kind of stuff. Like, I think that's not going to be a really big ongoing problem. But the ongoing aspect of this that's going to be interesting to watch is with DJ Moore's injury. Spent Monday night in a hospital in Washington for observation, but then Ben Johnson says it's a groin injury and that he's day-to-day. And first thing I'll say on that is like, I don't even want to know what type of groin injury requires hospitalization, but I don't even want to think about what that could possibly entail. I hope everything's okay for DJ Moore, because if there's that's got to be pretty high on the list of things you don't want to be hospitalized. Is anything in the groin area? I mean, obviously there's more serious stuff, but the discomfort there is probably a little bit more than, some kind of tendon issue somewhere else. Anyway, the other thing, so then if depending on how long DJ Moore is going to be out, then you just end up playing both Luther Burden and Zacchaeus. Like, maybe Luther Burden does more of the DJ Moore type of role stuff where you give him the ball in a variety of different ways. Maybe even put him in the backfield at some point. And maybe that can be your way of getting Luther Burden more playing time without necessarily having to completely sacrifice Olamide Zaccheaus' playing time for now. And then when DJ Moore is back, you can kind of evaluate, okay, how is Burden doing in this bigger role? How has Zaccheaus bounced back or maybe not bounced back? And then kind of evaluate playing time from there. But all along, this was Ben Johnson's plan, right? He would rather have too many good receivers and got to figure out how to use them than not have enough good receivers and trying to manufacture a passing game there. So I'm not worried about the passing game overall, and I am curious to see what the absence of DJ Moore, if there's a prolonged absence of DJ Moore, what that does to affect things. But having a better running game certainly will help that, and having a better run defense will help the offense overall too, and that's going to be fun to watch moving forward against the Saints, where they should have a good opportunity to maintain a lot of the success. We'll get a deep dive on what the Saints offered later this week on the Locked On Bears podcast. On Thursday's podcast, I guess that's tomorrow's podcast, we're going to be talking to Ross Jackson from Locked On Saints for our Crossover Thursday podcast. So that's why you got to hit the subscribe button on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts, because that's going to be the best way to keep up with all of our daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And if you're looking for a second listen today, you can get that head start scouting report on the Saints by checking out Locked On Saints, or you can get more football talk over at Locked On NFL. It comes out twice a day, once in the morning with Tyler Rowland, and then again in the afternoon with Tony Wiggins in the barbershop, breaking down all the biggest stories across the NFL. So go check out Locked On NFL for your second listen. Coming back to make Locked On Bears your first listen once again tomorrow for another opportunity to bear down.